A massive upset took place in a Toronto area by-election. Toronto-St. Paul's, a riding that's been a Liberal stronghold for over 30 years, ended up going to a Conservative. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, who joins us once again from the Big Smoke. Now, Brian, Liberal Carolyn Bennett was the MP in that riding for what, about 25 years, until she left to become the ambassador to Denmark, and now belongs to the Conservative candidate, Dawn Stewart, who beat the Liberal candidate, Leslie Church, and Stewart won with 42.1% of the vote compared to Church's 40.5%. Can you discuss the magnitude of this upset and what it means for the Trudeau Liberals?
Well, this goes to 11. If you remember Spinal Tap, this is beyond the Richter scale in terms of electoral shocks. I'm not overplaying this. Last time the Conservatives won, Barbara McDougall won it in 1988 for Brian Mulroney's Progressive Conservatives, and she was very much the old school red Tory. She was the last person to win it. People that were alive when she won this are now 35 years old. So think about that. There's a good chunk of the electorate that don't ever remember the Conservatives winning there. It's a very diverse riding in the western part. It's a very working class, lower income. You've got middle income areas. You've got high income areas, diverse ethnically, religiously. There is one area with a large Jewish population. That was a factor in it. But I'll tell you what, Hal, while that was a factor and people fed up with Justin Trudeau was a factor, another would be the number of people upset at the capital gains tax changes. A lot of small business owners in this riding, a lot of people that own their own shops, who are doctors, professionals of some sort. They were furious at these changes, which, by the way, took effect today. So you're voting the day before this big change, which the grain growers of Canada say will hit farm families with a 30% tax increase. Well, there's no farm families in Toronto, St. Paul's. It's smack dab in the middle of the city. But a lot of people in the same boat saying, I'm not going for this. A lot of people upset over the Trudeau government's position on the war in Israel and Gaza. So there were a number of factors at play here. Around midnight last night, it was still about a 10, 11 point lead for Leslie Stewart. Shortly after midnight, I texted a friend on Stewart's campaign and said, hey, congratulations. It's a polite thing to do. Congratulations. Looks like you guys won. They said, not ready to celebrate. We're nervous about the advanced polls. It wasn't until around 4:30 this morning, local time in Toronto, that it flipped so that Stewart was in the lead. They counted all night. And then around just before 5:30, he was declared the winner. That's how long it took. This 84 names on the ballot, meter-long ballot. It took forever to count this thing by hand.
Yeah, I saw all of the independents. I'm like, really? Come on. I couldn't believe how many independents were
Well,
running there.
that's actually the work of a guy who is an electoral reform activist, and he's done it before in places like Winnipeg, and he did it here this time. He registered 76 of these candidates and was the official agent for all of them. I don't know what point he's trying to make because he's not really talking to the media about it, but it did cause a lot of headaches in the by-election.
Yeah, and I looked at all the votes, 7 votes here, 6, 5, 3 votes. I'm like, come on. So, Brian, bottom line, what does this signal? Could we see Justin Trudeau maybe step down as prime minister and leader of his party? Is there even the prospect of an early election call?
I think all kinds of things are up in the air right now. I've been in the Trudeau's not leaving camp. He's determined to stay and fight Pierre Poilievre. He believes he's the only one that can save us all from misinformation and disinformation, even though he's one of the biggest purveyors of it. But this has to change things. He has to spend the summer looking at this and saying, is it better for me and the party? Is it better for the country if I leave and step aside, let someone else take over? Give them a year to try and turn things around for the Liberal Party? I'm not sure what he's going to do, but he has to take time and reflect on this. Now, if he does step down, could that lead to an early election? Absolutely. Would the NDP look at this and say, hey, the Liberals are weak now, let's pounce? Well, if they base it on their performance in Toronto, St. Paul's, no. Because even though the party doesn't normally perform very well in Toronto, St. Paul's, they perform below their national average. They were extremely pathetic last night, only barely getting into double digits. And so that also tells you, Church came as close as she did only because she peeled away NDP votes, and an awful lot of liberals went over to the Conservatives, or former liberals went over to the Conservatives. So I think things are just in flux right now, and maybe everyone talks about Pierre Trudeau's walk in the snow. Maybe over the summer months, Justin Trudeau takes a walk in the sands at Tofino and thinks about his future.
Brian, it appears as though the Trudeau government has no end of headaches, including butting heads with premiers here in Alberta and in Saskatchewan who are vowing to fight provisions of Bill C-59, or it's being called a green gag law. Now, the changes to the Competition Act have industry groups upset as well. Can you explain why?
What a bizarre way to get people angry. The Competition Act, normally it's boring and we just talk about how they can't do anything. Just look at the price of gas and look at the price of groceries, and they never actually solve anything. Well, Bill C-59 gives them new powers, and these powers include being able to go in and fine companies up to $10 million on their first offense if they make statements that the competition commissioner believes are false or go against the environment or climate change. Now, the company would have a chance to be able to say, well, no, this is why we made the comments we did, and here's the information to back it up. But it's up to the competition commissioner to decide whether they accept that or not. This is like taking Charlie Angus's bill, which sought to criminalize it, and putting it into law, except instead of a criminal penalty, you're going to face lawfare, because people can just complain about your company. You're going to face lawfare or massive fines. And so a bunch of companies, including some of the biggest in the Canadian oil and gas sector, and groups like Pathway Alliance, they've taken down a lot of statements. So let's say you wanted to make a claim about how much cleaner it was and better for the environment for you to heat your home with natural gas instead of oil or coal. Well, you could have someone go and complain to the competition commissioner, and then even if you're not found guilty, you're spending a bunch of time fighting that through a quasi-judicial process. This is unreal. I don't think it's constitutional, Hal, but it's on the books now, and the industry is upset. Premier Smith and Premier Moe have both said they're going to fight it. They've both said they will use their similar but somewhat different acts. Alberta Sovereignty Act and Saskatchewan First Act, I think, are their names. But I'm not sure, having read the acts a bit, I'm not sure they apply in this case. I think it's going to have to go to court.
There's also some controversy surrounding Bill C-63, Brian, or the Online Harms Act. That bill would give the CRTC and the head of the Canadian Human Rights Commission the ability to police online speech. Now, apparently there are some questions surrounding the man who's been appointed to run the commission.
Yeah, his name is Mr. Tatani, and he is someone who's originally from Calgary, who, Shuvaloy Majumdar had run-ins, I'm told, with years ago at the University of Calgary, who's been involved in different legal cases there, was at one point a regional director for the Alberta Human Rights Commission, and now he's been appointed the head of the Canadian Human Rights Commission. But he's also someone who's made statements or reposted things on social media equating Israelis and Nazis, that Palestinians are the new Warsaw Ghetto Jews. He's called for Israel to be convicted of war crimes. An awful lot of statements that don't give you the sense that this is someone with clean hands on an issue that's going to be central to this. It looks like this is someone who comes with a definite agenda, a definite worldview that he has put out there with some force. And that's fine as long as you're not trying to police what I say. And that's the position he's going to be in. So a lot of questions about that. Shimon Fogel from Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center went to Ottawa to speak to the Justice Minister, Arif Farani, about that. He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know." Admittedly, some of these posts are from several years ago, but he's got a long online history that's been well documented. And that has to leave all of us with a lot of concern. I have enough concerns with Bill 63, no matter who's doing it. Now I've seen who the government wants to be the the judge of all things online, and now I'm even more concerned. So everyone should be reaching out to their MP and raising concern with not only the bill, but who the police and judge will be.
So while the feds are wanting to move forward with Bill C-63, Brian, comes word that the Trudeau government is paying millions of taxpayer dollars to influencers to get their message out. Don't these essentially look like ads on TikTok and Instagram that are being funded by taxpayers here?
Absolutely. A government that spreads an awful lot of misinformation and disinformation, by the way, is now paying people to make their fun videos on Instagram or TikTok and reach out to young people and say, hey, did you hear? And this is the truth. And this is what you need to know. Now, Minister Anita Anand, who's in charge of this file, says, well, it's because, I've got newspapers on my kitchen counter and my kids never read them. So, we have to be able to reach people somehow. Okay, great. But then buy an ad or tell your own story. Don't get people who are influencers because they have an audience. And I know influencers are derided. They come in all size, shapes, and forms. In some ways, people would say, well, Lily, you've got a big online audience. You're an influencer. Yeah, but if I'm going to do an ad for someone, I'm going to tell you it's an ad. I'm not going to pretend that I'm just talking about something. So, if anyone wants to pay me to do an ad for them, let me know, but I'll say it's an ad. This is very unbecoming of the government and leads to the question of, again, how they handle issues like misinformation and disinformation. I don't trust the government. I don't trust any government. They all put their giant spin on things, and now it's being hidden to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars each and every year to try and spread their word without letting us know it's really an ad.
That's where we get the term spin doctors from. Brian, concerns are being raised as well about new provisions in Bill C-69 that would allow the federal health minister to ban or regulate where certain products such as vitamins or supplements could be sold. So what's the issue here?
So it's anything that's considered a therapeutic, and that's where vitamins and supplements come in, and they have some people worried. But Minister Mark Holland has also made it no secret that he really wants to go after nicotine pouches, which are used as a way to help people to stop smoking. And he wants them only sold in pharmacies. And he wants them behind the counter. And he'd really like to get rid of them. And he's saying that it's not safe to sell them in places like convenience stores, which, by the way, currently sell cigarettes. So, why can you sell cigarettes and not a smoking cessation product? But the law is also so vague that he could decide, he's given himself so much power that he could decide, claiming vitamin C is, good for your health in the winter. Oh, no, you can't do that. We're banning it. Or we're going to make it so that you have to go to a certain place to get vitamins or supplements. This has a lot of people concerned. It's a broad and sweeping power that the government has, given themselves. And you look at C-59, C-63, C-69. These all, that's the one thing they have in common. They are giving themselves broad sweeping powers, the kind that we should be wary of any government having, because, what I always tell people, Hal, is you may believe that the party that's in power now is all right to have those powers because you support them. But will you support the party that you oppose having those same powers? Probably not. And if that's your answer, that no, I wouldn't trust those guys with those powers, then don't trust these guys with those powers. And so there's a real theme of trying to control things going through the Trudeau government right now. Pierre Poilievre's not wrong when he says he doesn't want to control your life, but the current government does. They're showing with their own legislation that that's their agenda.
Brian, the latest inflation report is out. After going down slightly last month, it ticked back up to 2.9%. In your thoughts, what's really driving this? And will this maybe put a pause on more rate cuts by the Bank of Canada?
Potentially could. We'll have to see how the next inflation report goes. My colleague Lauren Gunter was pointing out that Stats Canada has announced they've changed how they're going to calculate inflation, and that will include putting more emphasis on food as part of the whole basket. I mean, they look at a whole basket of goods. What do you need to buy to live your life? And that's how they try and calculate inflation. It's not an exact science, but right now it's the best that we have. So this month, it was things like cell phone bills going up, goods and services, travel, all of those increasing. Food went up by about 1.5%. But since May 2020, food inflation has gone up just shy of 23%. You're paying on average. Now, I know some things are even higher, 40, 50, 60% higher than they were at the beginning of the pandemic. But on average, you're paying a quarter more for your groceries than you did 4 years ago. Oh my goodness, that is very tough for the average family to swallow. And that's about to change with the inflation rate. So if it goes up again next month and the month after that, I could definitely see Tiff Macklem and the Bank of Canada saying, well, hold on, we can't cut rates any further. We don't want to accelerate the economy. We need things to slow down. We're kind of in a really bad situation right now. Housing crisis going on in many parts of the country. And one of the reasons that they're not building is interest rates are high, not only for the buyers, but for the builders. And they don't want to take on those types of rates because what it will mean for prices. Not a good economic situation to be in.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks for joining us today from Toronto.
Thank you, Hal.